Hello, my name is Justin Mitchell, and I'm a professor at Charleston Southern University. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for hosting one of our teacher candidates for this fall practicum experience. And I wanted to take a few moments to go over some of the expectations we have of our students. We shared a letter with our students earlier in the semester to give you, and we regret that with the hurricane we weren't able to have the meeting to share these expectations with you, but wanted to go over them for you to kind of help you understand a little bit about what they're expected to do this semester. If you haven't received this letter, it's linked on the page that I'm going to show you in just a moment, but I wanted to kind of go over those major expectations. So we have students in early childhood and elementary education who are doing both with the add-on licensure, and we have some that are just doing early childhood and some that are doing elementary. And so that kind of delineates some of the courses that they are taking. So, for example, for course 420, those are the folks who are taking the early childhood route. For those who are taking 421, those are the folks who are doing the elementary route. And some students are doing both. So, as you can see in the letter, most of these assignments are going to be common no matter which course they're taking. And the contact information you can find there. My email is there, Dr. Franklin's is there. And to kind of talk about, this is the classroom management and effective instruction class, and much of what our students are doing this semester is preparing for student teaching. And so in doing so, for each course, they're expected to complete 4 hours 10 hours in your practicum classroom for this class alone. Each course has that practicum component of the hours, and students are expected to log those according to their coursework. If they're the add-on folks for this specific section, or the 420-421 combo, they would need 20 hours because they're doing both. So students have a checklist, and that checklist basically acquaints them with much of what the work that is done prior to the students arriving in the fall. So you probably have seen this and signed off on this. This is probably coming to a close. Most students are finishing this up at this point. It's basically equating them with the resources and folks who they need to be aware of within the school. That's something that they'll be completing and turning in. Also, for this specific course, students will be teaching 3 different lessons: a reading lesson, a math lesson, and a fine arts lesson. If they are the add-on folks, they'll be completing the extra reading and math. But for this, they'll be using the CSU lesson plan format. And for those of you who graduated from CSU, you're probably familiar with that format. But our teaching candidates have this available to them, and so they're familiar with what they need to do. I realize that some folks have specific grade level planning, and you divide up subjects and things like that, and that's fine. But what we'll ask our students to do is that they'll actually format whatever you're asking them to teach into that format, so that they can get the practice of understanding the structure of lesson planning. But for the reading, that's self-explanatory. The math is self-explanatory. The fine arts might be a little bit different in that it could be an integrated, so they could be using another subject area and integrating fine arts. It doesn't have to be a fine arts lesson in itself, but it could be maybe a social studies fine arts integration or a math fine arts. However, they have to be separate lesson plans. They cannot double dip, so to speak. Also, there's an expectation that students will complete Teacher for the Day. This is going to be in addition to the hours that they would accrue through their practicum experience. The Teacher for the Day experience is to prepare students for the work that you do from the beginning of your day all the way to the end. So we want our students to have that experience prior to going into student teaching. So it's kind of their dry run for the student teaching experience. That being said, we need for those lesson plans, the reading, the math, and fine arts lessons, to already be completed. So this is kind of a gradual step process. They're teaching a reading lesson, they're teaching a math lesson, they're teaching a fine arts integrated lesson. And then as they move up through the process, then the first week of November is usually when we expect that Teacher for the Day experience to occur. And that would be they would arrive when you arrive. If you have morning duty, they do morning duty. If you have lunch duty, they do lunch duty. If you have car duty in the afternoon, they do car duty. So their day should mirror what yours looks like. And we've built in some practicum days that will allow for this to occur. So that's kind of that. For the teacher for the day, there are also students will plan the lessons for that as well, and that would be all day. And those would be in addition to the other lessons that they've already taught for other classes. But most importantly, they will receive an evaluation using the new ADEPT standards, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but the new evaluation tool, and that's what we want you to evaluate just one of those lessons if they are either early childhood or elementary. If they're both, we would like for you to do 2 ADEPT lessons, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment for the teacher for the day. Also, students in this class are working on their long-range plan. And for many of you, you already have a long-range plan, and you're certainly welcome to share that with them. That would certainly be helpful for them as they haven't done this process before. But the goal is for them to understand scope and sequence. And for the long-range plan, we care less about the long-range plan for the fall. It's great for them to know that, but what we want them to focus on is for the spring, because the spring is what they'll be doing their student teaching in, and they'll actually be implementing their long-range plan and doing a unit work sample. And so that's why they have to have this kind of done before spring semester. So they'll be submitting it to us for grading. So if you have curriculum guides or pacing guides, whatever your district calls them, because we have several different districts represented, please share those each of those subject areas curriculum guide with your student teacher, just for the simple reason it helps them with the planning, because they are doing the long range scope and sequence. And regardless of whether you are teaching, maybe you just teach in upper elementary and you just teach ELA or you just teach math, they are expected to teach or plan in their long-range plan for all 4 of the core subject areas. So math, ELA, science, and social studies, because they're going to be designing an integrated unit for the unit work sample, in which they're going to need to know what's being taught at what time. So if you could please share those curriculum pacing guide documents with your student teacher so that he or she is able to effectively plan for their long-range plan. That's kind of a critical piece. I know some folks were confused because they're like, why do they need to know that if they're going to be worried about that in the spring? Well, because they're planning now for what will be done in the spring. It's kind of a twofold process. So please help them in that process. For each of the documents that they have there, oftentimes places for signatures, especially with their practicum log. So they'll be showing you those things and asking for your signatures there. All of the observation hours that students are expected to do for this specific course should be done by November 17th. So pretty much everything should be pretty much wrapped up by Thanksgiving. That would be the goal, obviously. But any of the things that you need to see, your students have access to, and I will show you on the little Weebly site that we've created where you can find those documents also. For 412 and 413, this is going to be, 412 is the social studies methods class that students take as seniors. 413 is the science methods class, and one of those is taught by Dr. Butler, the other is me, and so you can contact us if you have questions. For each of these classes, students are expected to complete 10 hours of practicum. That also has a log. Students also are expected to do a teacher interview, so talking to you specifically about teaching science or teaching social studies in your classrooms. And if you don't teach social studies or science, for example, you just teach ELA or you just teach math, if you could please help place our students in classrooms that do. So if you switch classes with someone, just help them make that contact to reach across the hall and maybe put them in touch with that teacher that can help them with that interview. Students also are expected to teach 1 social studies lesson and 1 science lesson. And again, if you don't teach those subject areas, if you could help them get into a classroom that does. So each time they come, they'll be documenting that on a log form, which will require your signature. Any observations that they need to be doing, again, are all due November 17th. And then Students also take course 310 and 380. Those are the curriculum and assessment classes. So those are divided up by early childhood and elementary. So again, students are expected to do 10 hours of practicum. They're going to complete their unit work sample, which is going to be taken from the long range plan. So that's why it's critical to have that long range plan completed prior to working on the unit work sample. So they do have a lot of responsibility that we place on them, but it's all to help them in their student teaching experience and then to be successful in their first year. Students also are going to complete a kid watching project, which they can tell you more about. They have some assignments for Dr. Yarborough there. And finally, the course that they're taking would be the 338, which is a math methods class. And in that class, students are expected to complete 10 hours practicum as well as teaching a math lesson. So if you have any questions about these assignments, please feel free to reach out to the professors that are listed in that letter. If you have specific concerns regarding a placement, please contact Beth Livingston. Her email address is listed there below. If you look on this site, this is Charleston Southern SOE.weebly.com, and I'll share this link in the email that I'm going to send. But this is the Weebly site that we've created, in which we are going to disseminate some information for you. And if you click here, this just tells a little bit about what we're doing. In clinical practice, this is what we refer to as student teaching. We have information about this lesson plan, the long-range plan, and the unit work sample. Each of these links will take you to a page that has a description of the assignment, a video that walks you through the process and procedure for completing the assignment, as well as any templates or documents that you would need related to the assignment. If it's specific to the evaluation of a lesson that you would do, there's the evaluation document that you would need to do for whatever grade level that you have there. So those are all things for clinical practice. However, know that our students are working on those this fall in preparation for that. We also are moving to a co-teaching model for student teaching. So if you select the co-teaching tab, that kind of talks you through that and goes over some of the 6 strategies of co-teaching. There'll be more information to come about co-teaching as we move forward. We'll have a face-to-face training about that for our cooperating teachers and our student teachers. But this is just kind of an overview. It's nothing new that you may or may not be, that you would not be familiar with. If you have been in certain school districts, you may have already received training in this. If not, you are familiar with this. If you have taught an inclusion classroom where maybe you've had support teachers that have done push-in instead of the pull-out program with exceptional children, or also with the gifted students, so you're familiar with the co-teaching model. You just maybe aren't familiar with it in those terms. The evaluation tab talks about an overview of the domains of the new expanded ADEPT rubric. There's also a document here where you can actually find the rubric so that you can see what that looks like. And then obviously the letter that I'm sharing with you today is here under Practicum assignment, so it talks about the Practicum experience. And then finally, the contact information. This is for the School of Education if you needed to just get in touch with us. This is the general number to the School of Education. You may also click here, and that takes you to Charleston Southern's webpage that has each of our individual contact information listed, maybe, if the Wi-Fi is working. But if you scroll down, you can find each of us here with our contact information. Most of that information that you would need is on the letter, but I wanted to take a moment to kind of go over those things with you. We sincerely appreciate you taking time to invest in our students. We appreciate the hard work that you do in the classroom for your students, and appreciate the opportunity you have afforded our folks to learn from you, the experts. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we hope you have a wonderful week.